Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this episode we're going to continue to work on the MGA. And as you might remember, the MGA had a serious crash last year, and both fenders in the front and the rear were damaged. Together with some bodywork in previous episodes, we already have straightened up the front. But what we are still missing is the front valance. That valance is gone. Now, I could buy a new one, but I could also build my own. So I decided to build my own aluminum-based valance. And to do so, I'm going to use some aluminum sheet metal. Now I've got sheets of aluminum of 1.5 mil and 1 millimeter, because in racing you want to have things as light as possible. Now, I'm not a professional metal worker, so building a valance in one piece is going to be a bit difficult for me because it has a lot of curves to it. So I'm going to make it out of 3 pieces. The biggest piece is going to be the one which is going to sit right here in the middle. So it's going to span from this corner all the way to the other side. And it's going to come down so it covers up the oil coolers. And then I'm going to make the side pieces because they're a little bit more tricky to make because it has more different curves. So I already have cut that panel, and now I need to bend it in a certain form so it takes the curve and it also curves down a little bit. And for that, I'm going to use the English wheel, and here we have it. It's a big wheel in the top which is very flat, and there's a curved wheel underneath like this one. They come in different shapes. It all depends on what kind of a curve or shape you want to give your panel, and you just roll your panel back and forward. Now, I am a novice with the English wheel. I can do a few little things, but really I don't master it. It takes a lot of exercise. But there's plenty of videos on the English wheel on how to use it. So I'm going to roll the panel back and forth until I have the shape I want to get. Now, as you can see, we're already getting a pretty nice curve that probably will match up the front of the card for that middle part. Now, this is going to be the bulk of the valance, and it is 1 millimeter thick aluminum, so not really thick, so you can see it's a bit flimsy. So that is why I will have to strengthen it at the bottom. So we're going to make a rim on the edge, and also on the top we will then be able to bolt it down. So here's the panel, and I made already a little hole for the stud there, and this is where we're going to place it actually. It's going to come that low. I think that's good. I also will drill some big holes here for the oil cooler, which is right behind it. The roller I just placed on is a very flat one. I want to get the unevenness out of the panel. Before I'm going to install the reinforcement on the edges, I'm going to make 3 holes. And the holes are going to be for the cooling of the oil cooler, and for that one I'm going to use a die, and this is actually a die with a profile. So I need to drill the holes first, and then I'm going to press out the metal. But to do so I need to mark first of all where the holes will go. It's 11 down. So that's my first one. It's going to go right here. You just see how that will look like. I'll have a hole right here. Oops, I should have brought the other one as well. I'll have a hole right here. I think that will be okay. So let me drill the holes and then we punch it out. So I got the die installed. Now we take the panel and we put the top part through it. And we just turn it in. And this will press itself through the aluminum. And as this is only 1 millimeter thick, this is going fairly easily. And I will do this for all 3 holes. I think it pushed itself through it, and now it's creating the edge of the rim. All right. So let's release it and see what we have. Here we go. And we got a nice little hole. All right, so now that we have these holes, you can see how it's going to start to look like. So these holes are intended for the oil coolers, which are behind. So now we need to install the lower edge, and this is going to be with little bolts, because I initially thought of actually using rivets, but I'm just going to bolt it. To make the enforcement on the bottom of the valance, I'm going to bend a square corner. And that will allow me now to use the scrinker or the stretcher to make a certain curve on it. This is what we call a scrinker, and in the back we have a stretcher. And as the name implies, scrinker means you're going to bring the metal together. So if I'm using the scrinker and I'm going to use that on one side of that squared angle piece of aluminum we made, it's going to shrink it, and automatically it's going to start bending. As you can see now, this is fairly straight. So I place it in here and I push the pedal. You can see how the metal already starts to bend. There you go. You see, we already have a nice bend. So I need to continue like this until I have the proper curve. And with the stretcher, we're just going to have the opposite effect. I'm just going to show you that on this little piece of metal here. So I'm going to put it in, and now you're going to see it's going to bend the other direction. And the harder you push, the more of a curve you get. So here you go. So this is what you can do with a stretcher and a scrinker, and that's what I use to create that curve for that support. So here's the part that we have just been creating, and this is the part that's going to enforce the lower part of the valance. And we've been using the scrinker to get this exact shape. So now let's see if the shape is matching up to the front of the car. And to me that looks quite all right. This is exactly what I wanted to have. And it's going to go, of course, on the bottom, and it will really enforce that valance. I will be using very small bolts. This is an M4 inbus, so they will be coming through that enforcement edge like this. So I'm going to probably install one every 10 centimeters. So I'm just going to draw the line, the center line, where it's supposed to be. Now, I was planning every 10 centimeters, but I think I will do it every 6. All right. That's very handy, a marker like this. So there's going to be a little bit of fiddling in the beginning, but once we got a couple installed, it's going to go a lot faster. Now rivets would have worked as well. The middle element is almost ready. I still need to trim it a bit on the edge here. and then we can try to install it. We still have to make the side pieces, but this part already looks reasonable okay. Let's see, with the grill on. So that's kind of the way it's gonna look. All right, so the middle valance is now in place, and I think this is a reasonable fit. It's rather solid. So for the sides, I will have to make a template, and I'm gonna make one out of paper first because we have quite some contours. It's gonna connect right here, and then it's gonna go up with an arc upwards to this side. So I'm not gonna go all the way because I gotta make sure the wheel can still turn. But before I do so, I have to make 100% sure that the fender is in its final place, which it isn't for the moment. I made a template for the left side of the valance and already transferred it to the aluminum panel. So now we'll need to cut the panel. I'm going to try to cut it as close as I can to the contour and then finish it up with a snapper. I'm going to try to bend this whole edge here, but as it is a curve, that's a little bit more difficult. So I probably will bend it in pieces and then, do some cuts and see how that goes. And therefore, I'm going to remove some of those blades so I can put the panel in. That's why. We can always put the smaller ones in afterwards. The idea is that I would bend it along this line here, and I would change the knives depending on the curve. So I will need to cut it right here. Well, let's see how that works. No, that should work more or less. If I get it properly in and aligned. All right. Now, I'll do this side. And I will need to cut it there. All right. And now I'm going to need the smaller blade or knife to the other edges. All right. And now we have one last part to do, which is this one. So that's the kind of cut or bend I have. So now I'm going to hammer it a bit so it's level. I'm going to roll the panel so we can get it into shape. All right. I think this is coming along better now. Okay, so let's see the rest. I've seen on the English wheel that I was trying to create this shape here, and we had an edge which was folded over in the back, and that didn't work too well. I just couldn't get it right. Maybe I did something wrong. So I decided to cut it off, and now we have that part loosely fitted, but it doesn't look right here, of course. And now I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. But let me give you a little bit of a close-up what I mean. Can be easily. Now this piece I will actually bolt down to the fender, but I will also have it laid in here. So this panel will actually sit flush with this panel. So that is not the issue. The issue was to create this rim or this edge here. And I've tried it. And this was really difficult. I probably don't know how to do it. But I don't know if this would even look good. And it's not even finished yet. You can see the angles don't work out yet. I probably could get it sorted out if I spent a lot of time on it. But then I would have to sand it down a lot because it has a lot of marks from the stretching and the shrinking. So the alternative would be that I don't do this. I would have a couple of bolts here. The panels are flush. There's going to be an overlap, but a flush overlap. And then I could use some of those edge protectors. This is pretty good stuff. So I might just do that on the edges here. I think the front is looking quite all right. Even the holes that we have here for the oil coolers, I hope they are big enough. If not, I may add one on the left and one on the right. So let's create the lip here. And to do so, I want to make sure that the fender is in the right position, because this car is using what we call piping. It's kind of a plastic seal that goes in between the panels. And I just want to make sure that this is right, so that the lip is in the right place. So I think this is about right. And that's the lip we're going to create. This is just one example where you see how a lip looks like. So it's one piece of metal which is then deformed a bit, so it goes down, and we call it the lip, so that another panel can rest on it and be flush with it. And then you can put the bolts right here, and now you have a very flush surface. I will be using a roller to create the lip, and I'm using a 1/16 of an inch roller, and they come in different sizes depending on how thick the material is. And it's always a good idea to try it on a piece of scrap metal. It feels like this is going very smoothly. As you can see, we've got a nice lip, but I think I might use a bit more pressure. Okay, so here we go with our panel. And I'm going to go along the red line. Slowly. You want to go as straight as possible. Now it's handy if you have an aid with you. I'm on my own, so I need to turn the wheel and direct the panel. But here it is, so I think this will be all right. So I installed the panel that we just put a lip on, so now that's quite flush. So now I'm going to drill a hole here so we can lock it all back together with some bolts. One here, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to put the edge up, and then I will continue with the other side. So let's put it up. At the end, I decided not to extend this edge all the way up here. It's a bit too difficult to build. And, well, maybe some of you guys can do this better than I can. But I don't know exactly how to do it. I might do it later. But then again, this is not a showroom car. This is a race car that's going to go back onto the track. So I'm going to install this rubber on the edges here, that's a pretty good protection. And there's nothing wrong with something like this. Now, okay, you can call me lazy if you want. Now all this I will have to disconnect later again once we start painting the car. But I want to do a full fit before we start any painting. So that should give you a bit of an impression on how the car will look like once we are done with it. But there's still a long way to go. Now I'm going to fix the other side just like I've done this side. And then I'll come back to you when that is done. So folks, this is the end of this video, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. And as you have seen, building a front valance for the MGA isn't all that complicated. I could have made it in one piece if I wanted to, but that would have taken me a lot of work, and now I have it in several pieces and it's a bit easier to assemble and to put it all back together. I have assembled most of it right now to make sure that everything fits. Of course, I have to take it all apart again, and we'll have to clean things up, and we have to start painting the fenders and, you know, putting some polyester on the metal part there on the other side where we had this huge dent. But that's all going to be for the next video, after I have fixed the backside of this car. So thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.